All right, guys, we're back. This is another episode of MMA Past, Present, and Future, brought to you by Sherdog.com. I am your host. My name is Keith Shillan. I got an absolutely loaded panel. I'm going to go with my first guest, but you guys know I really take pride in my introduction. I'm going to do a little different, because before I was a media member, I was a fan. And the last time I did this, I said there's two fighters that I used to cheer for more than anybody, and that was Randy Couture and Anderson Silva. No, I'm just kidding. And the guy I'm talking to right now, former middleweight champion of the world, now current one championship vice president, UFC Hall of Famer, one of my all-time favorite fighters, and my wife's all-time favorite fighter, Rich Ace Franklin.
What's going on? Well, just so you know, I used to cheer for Anderson as well.
Yeah.
Except for when he fought me. Then I wasn't cheering for him, obviously.
So, Rich, I just said, I just called you UFC Hall of Famer, and obviously you have the accolades to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. I mean, you think about the guys you've beaten, Evan Tanner, a legend, Ken Shamrock, Chuck Liddell. I mean, I don't have to do it. Just go to Sherdog, check it out. You got the who's list. But were you surprised to get in the UFC Hall of Fame just simply the fact because your connection to one championship, and sometimes it's not always nice with the UFC and other organizations?
Yeah, but maybe a little bit. I was actually down. I was down in Cebu in the Philippines filming for the One Warrior Series show that I was doing on this side of the planet for one. I travel around and recruited talent, and I was down there filming, and I got a message from Dana's assistant who was like, "Hey, Dana wants to know if you're free for a call." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I said, "I can make some time tomorrow around breakfast time." Like I was kind of doing the time zones in my head if he's free. And she's like, yeah, he'll give you a call. And then so the next morning, like before breakfast, my phone wasn't ringing. And so then I actually text Dana and I said, "Hey, are you big timing me?" And he's like, "Dude, I've been calling you for the last 15, 20 minutes. I had no clue what he needed. And he's like, "Yeah, I've been calling you for the last 15 minutes. So yeah, my phone's not ringing." So we connected and just chit chat a little bit. It was nice catching up. I hadn't talked to him for a bit, but and then he says, "Hey, we're going to induct you in the Hall of Fame." And I was completely shocked because not that. I mean, there's no bad blood or anything like that, but I am on the other side of the planet, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And there've been a number of years since I've retired. And so I just kind of figured like, I guess I'm not on that list. Yeah. So yeah, when I did get that call and he told me that, I was completely caught by surprise there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it was obviously the accolades there, but also when you were one of the champions of the organization, I always think of that era that really kind of got the UFC over the hump. And I always so here's a joke for you. Like, everyone always talks about Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar, that fight saved the UFC, but I'm like, don't forget that you won the main event of that same card.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that. A lot of people remember my fight against Ken Shamrock, but they forget that it was actually the main event after that match. Like that was the first event that the UFC did on a non-pay-per-view show. It was on Spike, and it was live television at the time. And there was some stuff that came with that I was never, like, a lot of the fighters weren't used to dealing with. For example, when Ken and I fought that night, it was at the Thomas and Mack Arena at UNLV. So it was a smaller arena, and we both came up the same elevator, like, for our walkouts. So it was like this stare down that lasted probably 15 to 20 minutes because it started in the basement level at the freight elevator. We both kind of walked up to the elevator like, what's up? And then the whole time in the elevator. And then finally, like, we walk out and we get in the ring, and after we're in the octagon and Bruce Buffer announces us, then they're like, cut to commercial, which was not part of a normal fight.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm standing there like doing my bounce like for like 3 minutes staring at Ken, and then we come back to live TV, and there's a little bit of like, and now we're ready for the main event and all that kind of stuff. So this ended up being like a 15-minute stare down, and at that time, I didn't have a lot of fights in the UFC, and I was just like, I'm scratching my head like, man, I'm staring Ken Shamrock down for like the world's most dangerous man, right? And
he was supposed to win. He was the face. No disrespect, but at that time, he was the face.
No, well, I mean, that's the whole thing. That match, every fighter has a fight in their career like that where it's a make you or break you thing.
Yeah.
And for the UFC, it was a good matchup for a main event because if Ken wins, everybody knows who Ken is.
Of course.
But if Ken loses, now they've got this breakout star.
That's right.
And so for a while, I went from being nobody to being the guy who beat Ken Shamrock.
That's right.
And still nobody knew my name, right? And
Yeah.
So that's kind of how those things happen.
Now, your next fight was Evan Tanner, right, for the title? Or was there one in between?
No, because because I dropped down to 185 and I ended up fighting Jorge Rivera first.
Oh yeah.
At 185, then
I'm looking it up. No, your next fight.
Yeah, I fought.
Evan Tanner.
I fought Jorge before that. Okay, yeah, but here's the reason why I was confused for a second, because I had already dropped down to 185, but Ken and I fought at 205.
205, yeah.
And I can remember that when I was actually during the weigh-ins. The weigh-ins were at the parking lot of the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas, and I remember when Ken stepped on the scale, he was actually a pound lighter than me. He was 203, and I weighed in at 204, and I was a little shocked by that because he always looked so big in his photos, and I thought, man, maybe he's done something different with his training, and there's like I was like, what do I have to be worried about here? Like I started like in my head like figuring out like what was different about the game plan and if we overlooked anything.
And another reason why I thought you were obviously a no-brainer is at that time when you became the middleweight champion and Chuck Liddell was the light heavyweight champion, you two became the examples. Now this was still when the UFC, it's not the John McCain human cockfighting, but you're still trying to get legalized in certain states. And like you can tell by my accent, I'm from Southern New England, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. We weren't legalized yet, and you're trying to get this. And Chuck was the one that they used to be as real as he gets, got the mohawk, he's got the scary look. But you were the one, and then they used you. You were the clean shaved, the former teacher. They used you
the boy
as
next door.
Yeah, they used you as like, no, look how well spoken. They had you guys had like the two extremes. Like if they wanted to appeal to the blood and guts, they threw out Chuck Liddell. If they wanted to appeal to the wow, like this guy's intelligent, they're not savages, then they brought you in.
Well, I always, I have people that'll ask me like, man, do you feel like you miss the paydays of like this wave now? Because I was the precursor to that. I was like the equivalent of the football players that played in the NFL in the 1960s, right? Sure. You played this gridiron game, but you didn't get the paydays that these, once like the 80s started hitting, like the paydays of sports really began to change.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, I said, man, I don't know in this modern landscape if I would be able to survive as a personality because I didn't have to do anything outlandish at the time. I'm not a big social media guy. I mean, I post things on social media, but there are people that just like they know how to really market themselves on social media, and they want to market themselves. And so whether you're doing these like crazy outlandish things or creating this, I don't know, public persona or whatever it may be, I was just this guy from Cincinnati who taught high school that happened to be pretty daggone good at martial arts.
Yeah.
And I got to be myself, and I was well spoken. And so when we were on like the Bill O'Reilly show, or when anytime we had like an AP press conference or something like that, I was always the person that they brought in because I could speak very intelligently about the sport. And because I was allowed to be myself, I didn't have to create some sort of persona or something like that. That was my niche. I didn't have to create a niche. My niche was just me, and that's what the sport needed at the time. And so fortunately for me, that played out really well because we needed that legitimacy to show that, like you said, you referenced John McCain talking about us being human cockfighting and all that stuff. And we needed the exact opposite of that.
When you were hanging it up, did they ever reach out to you about like commentating? Because you seem like perfect for that role. And it's kind of the role they've done with many fighters since.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. But I did a couple things with Fox when, like towards the tail end of my career. Yeah, kind of. And I'll be honest, I think I'm better in an analyst role than I am a commentating role. Like I work alongside of Mitch Chilson and Chiavello now.
Sure,
for one championship.
Of course, yeah.
And man, Michael Chiavello, he's an amazing commentator. Like I see this guy just bring the show in and out and counts down on time, and I just sit and watch him. I'm like, wow, like it's really nice to watch. Like it's almost like I watch somebody who the same as like somebody watching me doing MMA as a fan. I'm sitting there watching him do his craft, and I'm like, it's crazy to see how good somebody is at their craft. But I sit in the booth with those guys, and Mitch and I have some fun banter. I posted recently. I don't know if you saw a post that I put up, but he and I had some fun banter where we argue back and forth, and some of the fans were like coming to him like, man, who the hell who are you to be arguing with Rich Franklin about this? But they're good guys. Like, they're good guys for hyping, and I do a better job at breaking things down.
Sure.
And so I do enjoy it. The UFC did actually used me in that role a couple times, but then there was nothing solid. And so when it came time for me to truly retire and looking for a more permanent position, something to parlay into after my fight career, they didn't have anything on the table for me, and One Championship offered me a spot.
Yeah.
But at the time, One Championship offered me a job in the organization, and I've probably had a dozen jobs since I've worked for them.
Sure.
Like, I've handled a dozen different things, and that just comes with being in the industry for so long.
Yeah. We'll get into that for 1 second. I want to wrap this up. So when you decided to retire, you didn't have one of these, 3-4 fight losing streak, get knocked out in the first round. Like, we've seen countless guys, countless legends have that thing. I mean, you were still in it. I mean, you 6 months earlier from your last fight, you beat Wanderlei Silva. I mean, you were right in it. So how hard was it to be as competitive as you are, and especially at that time, to decide to still leave at a very high level?
Yeah, keep in mind too, when I fought Wanderlei, that was 9 months after I had a 270-degree labrum tear in my shoulder that had to be completely reconstructed, that and my rotator cuff, and that was 9 months after my surgery. So I was like, I had my surgery, I recovered, I rehabbed. And then I began training, and then I got into fight prep all within 9 months and performed really well. It was my right shoulder too. So, and you can watch me jabbing in that fight. Like, clearly my shoulder was not an issue. But when it came time to retire, just to be honest with you, like, I was tired, man. I listened to Misha on your this podcast as well with you. And that's what happens. Like, after I had a 10-year run basically with the UFC, and I had a 15-year professional career with all my matches prior to that.
Sure.
And then of course I had an amateur run, but in 1997, 98, 99, like, amateur careers at that point in time only lasted a half a dozen fights.
Yeah.
I recommend to people now, like, make sure you get your experience in, because you learn how to deal with other things like adrenaline dumping, listening to your corner, like, important skills to have as a fighter that don't just involve like punching and kicking.
Yeah.
And so, at the tail end of this, you start really getting worn down, like really worn down. And I can remember, for example, like when this first started is when I fought Vitor. I remember walking in for that fight, the first day of camp in the gym, and I wasn't supposed to fight Vitor, and there's a whole story behind that and everything. But anyway, I walked in the first day, and I kind of went like this, like, 2 hours. And it's just, what ends up happening in a career like this is you start to lose. I got into martial arts for the passion of doing something, like pursuing something excellent. And then it starts to become a little bit more about the business and more about the business.
Sure.
And so, you feel like, especially as you start to age through your mid 30s and whatnot, that you're running out of time. And as an athlete, that your earning potential only goes so far. And so you start to get worn down. And after I lost to Kung, mentally, like, physically, I'm sharp enough to still continue. I just got caught in that match. But mentally, I was like, okay, this loss has probably, if I really want to pursue a title at 185, has probably knocked me back 2 years, realistically. And I'm like, I don't have 2 more years of I don't have 2 more years of gas tank. I don't have that kind of burning desire anymore. Especially at the pace that you're kind of forced to run. I earned the title of company man because there's so many times that I took last minute fights and opponent switches and all that
Changing
kind of stuff.
weight classes.
Yeah, exactly, which is part of the story behind the whole Vitor fight. And so I said, maybe it's time to hang it up, because I always promised myself that I wouldn't just fight for the money. Like, I'm not going to do this for just the money. And so after that last fight, like, I was kind of mentally going back and forth in my head, like, yeah, I think I'm good. But it still took me some time to, even though I knew at one point, like, yeah, I'm done. It took me some time to actually really pull that trigger.
Sure.
And to formally announce it, because it's hard, man. It's like, even though it's still hard. But fortunately for me, I was ready to mentally check out before I had to physically, because I feel bad for the athletes who are on the opposite side of that.
Yeah. And it's usually that way too.
Yeah, a lot are. I mean, because why wouldn't you be, right? I mean, if you're riding high and you're winning championships or you're just winning fights, right? It's like, why would you want to like check out when you're riding high? You would want to make sure that you didn't I lost my train of thought. You would want to make sure that it's like, if I'm
you continue it, prolong it.
Yeah. What's the reason to check out? So what ends up happening is you see these athletes, and you're like, yeah, well, it's a shame because they lost 3 straight or whatever. You see these quarterbacks that have won so many Super Bowls, and then you suddenly look at like the stats of their last 3 or 4 years competing, and it's like, it's really crappy, and it's like, man, they could have gone out on top. It's like, but why would you? If you're on top, you want to keep producing top results.
That's right. Now, being from New England, you better not be talking trash about Tom Brady.
Oh, come on, man. He's not even with you guys anymore.
Yeah,
right?
but he's always in my heart. Well,
I'll tell you what, he's in everybody's heart in New England when he wins when they're sitting there going like, I knew they shouldn't have traded him.
Oh, trust me, I was doing that. But I mean, you could talk shit about it, because what the hell could I do about it? Anyways.
Nah. Actually, my brother's an avid Pats fan. Like, that's been his favorite team since they were junk.
Yeah.
And so he's not a bandwagon fan from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that a lot of people. That's the one thing about the sports industry. Just sidebar on this, man, is like, you've had a guy that's produced that many Super Bowl rings for you, and it's like, man, let him finish his career there. I know that sports is a business now and all that kind of stuff.
We're getting sidetracked. You have no idea. I was the same. I'm like, it's always the Patriot way. I said, no, if any guy deserves to overpay him and do it, it's Tom Brady. But that's the whole side. Well, I'll talk you out for the next hour and a half about how we blew that one. But you made a really good point about, and I never really thought about this. You lose one fight, you backtrack 2 years. You take the pages. They lose one football game. It's not. They don't say, "Hey, 2 years from now, maybe you can play for the Super Bowl." You can play again in 7 days.
No, and here's the thing about fighting versus other sports, right? If you lose a fight, like you said, it backtracks you 2 years. But if you lose a fight, especially right around the time I turned about 35, a few years after I lost my title, people are like, well, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, man, like, look at my winning. Like, I'm still winning, even though I'm not a champion. So the thing is this, like, the difference between, just to use football as a comparison, versus fighting. If you were a champion and then you lose the belt and it's like you're not champion, people are pretty much like, well, when are you going to retire because you're not champion anymore?
Yeah. Like, say that to Patrick Mahomes. Say that to Patrick. Like, he won the Super Bowl last year, lost the Super Bowl this year. Oh, when are you going to retire, Patrick Mahomes?
Exactly, right? Because this guy
could
have another decade of playing.
That's right.
Still, right? And so it's like, just because you're not the Super Bowl champion, and people forget that on a daily basis, I'm still going to the gym, training, and I'm competing, and it's what I love to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now that I've stepped away from the sport, like, it's not just stepping away, like just having a little bit of time off. It's like, I still love doing martial arts. I still love training. If you see any of the stuff that I post on my social media, like, I keep myself in great shape.
I mean, you look like
a lot of people are looking at me like, you got to come back. Like, what's going on? Oh, man, come on, you got one more in the gas tank. But and trust me, those thoughts, they pop into my head all the time, because I just think like, man, it's what you love to do, and you can't take it out of you no matter what. So. That was my first draft pick, was competing. My second draft pick is like, hey, I can still be in this sport.
Sure.
I've recruited athletes, I've scouted athletes, I've commentated, I've helped set up protocols for one championship. I've been in executive meetings and board meetings and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm still part of this sport, but that's always your second love, because competition is your first love.
Now, you said that you train. You said the thoughts come in. Did you ever really contemplate a comeback? Like, you talked about my interview with Misha, and at that time, and like, someone messaged me like, oh, she gave you, like, she lied to you. She said she wasn't, and I'm like, no, I actually believe at that time when we were talking, she seemed very content, and then things happen in life. Did you ever, like, really contemplate coming back?
Nah, I mean, mentally maybe I really contemplated it, but to actually get to a point where I pursued it, to say, okay, let me see here, because I don't know. I think about things differently. Towards the end of my career, particularly like after the Wanderlei fight, even though I won that match, you can go back and watch like the second round of that match. Like Wanderlei dropped me, and and I didn't have any lasting effects from it. But I get out of a match like that, and for 2 rounds, I didn't know where I was in that fight.
Yeah.
There's a whole funny story I tell about me being on my stool. But when you get out of a fight and you're in the locker room and you're kind of going like this, like, whew, okay, survived another one. Like, okay, I can still do my multiplication tables. Yeah, that math degree is coming in handy. I know what day of the week it is. Yeah, I still remember my middle name. When you start doing those kinds of things and checking, then it's kind of you kind of realize like you're not immortal as you get older.
Is it worth it?
Yeah, when I was 25 years old, I was invincible, right? Like nothing could hurt me.
You're dumb. You're fearless. You're 25. Yeah,
exactly. But as you get older, you realize like, man, this stuff is going to take a lasting effect. So for me, part of me, like now, if I was going to do a fight camp, truly, like if I wanted to get ready for another fight, I know me, like I would have to. I'm not like I'm in great shape, but I'm not in fight shape.
Sure.
And I was the kind of athlete that would not allow myself to fall out of shape between camps.
Yeah.
So I would have to get to a point where I felt like, okay, now I'm camp ready. So I'm like several months out of even being at that point to conduct a camp, in my opinion. So I'm just not one of the people that would be like, yeah, okay, maybe I could take a fight in 2 months and then just think I'm just going to jump back on the mat and get in full stride. It just doesn't work that way for me. But the reality is this is like when you do fight camps and you take another fight, like that stuff, it takes years off your life, man. Like, and so for me to actually really, really consider coming back, it would be like, what would make it worth it to me?
Yeah.
Right. And kind of in essence, like the stars would have to align. It would have to be the right person, the right money. And I would have to truly be motivated. And again, we're talking about all this stuff because I don't want to get listeners excited. We're talking about all this stuff in theory, but yeah.
Yeah. No, and I get it, and I remember those all access shows with Rochelle Leah following you around, and you had these legend. I remember the one circuit where you didn't stop. You'd run to one thing, you'd be hitting the military press, then you hit the air down bike, and then you'd run over. They'd be doing bench press with the chains on the like. I remember that, and that is. I mean, sometimes they say the training camp is worse than the actual fight, like how beat up you get in the training camp.
For sure.
And then it's like a weird balance because you have to train like an insane man to be at the top level. But then if you overtrain, you get some injuries, then you're not at the top level. It's like weird.
Exactly. Yeah. I actually, in my TED Talk some years ago, I kind of touched on this, but I talk about the differences between like first and second place. They're almost immeasurable. And I think in the TED Talk, I used the example of a men's 500-meter speed skating event. And the difference between gold and silver was 1/1000th of a second. Like, and that's it. That's the difference between number 1 and number 2. So it was like, did second place blink at the wrong time in the race, on a turn and cost him? Like, did he, something, whatever? Was his timing off on a single breath? It's something that's all it takes.
And the difference between 1 and 8 is like a half a second.
Yeah.
Like the first and last. First and last is half a second or something like that.
Yeah, because I think on that example, if I'm not mistaken, I think all three skaters were from the Netherlands. They all skated for the same team, and the first place and first and second was 1,000th of a second. This was 2012, I think, was the year the example I used. The difference between first and second was 1,000th of a second. Yeah. The difference between first, like gold and bronze, was 3/1000ths of a second.
Yeah,
and the first place and the third place were twin brothers.
There you go.
Right. So like the difference is it's like there's not much. Like, genetically, they're almost identical. Like, and when you think like 3/1000ths of a second, that's not even a blink. Like it's like I think a blink of an eye takes longer than that. Yeah. So it's like the difference between winning and losing can be very, very. That's all it takes.
It's funny you say that. I always think about these all-time wars where you have like. Whatever, Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I always feel for the fighter who loses because I'm thinking about like we just was entertained and we had the most all time, but one of them gets all the riches and the glory and the other one gets nothing.
Well, listen, I feel this all the time. Like over on this side of the planet, I was running out for one championship. I was running an organization called One Warrior Series. Yeah. Now, what I would do is I would travel around and recruit talent. Probably some of your listeners don't know. And I would recruit talent, and then off the talent that I recruited, we made like a TV show about it. The first 4 seasons are on YouTube. You can check them out. Some cool episodes. We do some cool stuff. And then all the other athletes, like we would build. I had my own roster, and I was carrying a roster of probably 130, 140 athletes.
Yeah.
But as I'm recording these shows, I get to know these people, and
Sure.
so I'm like, man, I'm really rooting for you.
Yeah.
And it's like they were fighting for a contract and one championship.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I ran this for 3 years and I give out I don't know, say a dozen contracts to one championship.
Yeah.
But that's out of 130 people.
Yeah.
And so you get emotionally attached to all these people because you get to know their backstories and how, a lot of these people, especially on this side of the planet, when they talk about growing up in poverty and you see the kind of poverty that they grow up in, it's like, wow, like poverty is not like, we drove a crappy car when I was a kid, and I had to shop at Kmart. It's like it's the real deal.
I had to wear my older brother's sweatshirt. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's poverty in the U.S., and I grew up in that kind of poverty as well. But I don't even talk about growing up poor on this side of the planet because to make the comparisons ridiculous. You get emotionally attached to these people, and you're like, man, when you see them lose, it's like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to lose, and typically two athletes have a similar kind of story where it's almost like it breaks your heart to see them, So yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't come back, but you go over your resume, and we're definitely gonna get to one championship, I promise. But we go over your resume and Chuck Liddell, Wanderlei Silva, Ken Shamrock, whoever, all these guys, even the guys you lost to were the all-time greats, Lyoto Machida and Anderson Silva. Is there one guy you're like, man, that's the one fight I didn't get?
Oh, like somebody that I didn't fight?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm thinking about all the guys at light heavyweight and middleweight, your two weight classes, and you fought them all. I mean, Dan Henderson, you fought all, is there one guy you're like, man, we never lined up. I wish I would have got that one.
Yeah, not because this is not a statement of dislike. I think that this is one, like when I name these names, this is a statement of where the fans would have really won out. But there was a lot of talk of Bisping and I.
Oh yeah. How did I forget that one?
Yeah, and we just never crossed paths. Like it didn't happen. I think that would have been a great one for the fans.
And that was when Bisping was hated too. Like Bisping, he kind of changed. Like he went from like a hated guy to like a fan favorite, but when you were still crossing paths, he was hated.
Yeah, and the thing about Bisping, man, when you watch his career, like you can really watch him just progress and evolve over his career. Yeah. And yeah, I mean that would have been a really, really fun match. I think
that has Ultimate Fighter like seasoned coaches written all over it. Exactly. I mean, I know you've done the show a bunch of times. Yeah. Even did that weird season where you and Hughes, who somewhat teammates, but you were opposite coaches. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't end up fighting because the thing was that whoever the winner of my fight with Evan Tanner for the title, whoever won that match was going to be the coach, and so so if Evan Tanner would have won, Matt would have fought Evan for the middleweight.
He would have went up to middleweight.
Yeah, to fight him for the title. But I think like going back to the question, I think another one, and I was actually signed to fight this match was Lil Nog. And then he ended up getting injured, and then they pulled the fight off the card. That was the one they did in Philly. And so, I think that would have been a fun one for the fans as well.
And my last question before we move on to one championship. So you have you're the middleweight champion. Do you feel any like nostalgia or connection to future champions of that weight class? Like when you see like Michael Bisping later on, or now Israel Adesanya, or Robert Whitaker, or whoever, do you feel any connection to them, or any kind of like nostalgia, like that's my title, that's my,
Nah, you know what, man.
And I don't mean it as a competitive sense.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Actually, when you ask the question, I think of it as like a connected sense. Like there's a
like my legacy. That's my legacy. That's the guy who's carrying on my legacy.
Yeah, I'll just say this: that when I think about like, it's not just middleweight champions, but it's like, for example, like when I see athletes compete in the UFC now, and like, it's almost like I view them as like an extended family. That's the kind of nostalgia I'm going to talk about. So, for example, like if there was a middleweight champion that like, I don't know, had a major car wreck and needed money donated for emergency surgeries, sure, I'd probably be the first guy that's like, let me put some money on that donation because he's a middleweight champion. So we're even though like a guy like Israel Adesanya doesn't know that we're connected, like we're connected by that in my mind. So it's like if he needed something out of like that connection to me or a professional courtesy or whatever, like I would probably go above and beyond. But not just people that are middleweight title holders, but just people in the sport that attain the sport at that kind of high level. It's like, the number of people that compete at a top level in a particular sport is very limited, right?
Oh,
I mean, when you think about it,
not even 1% of the world. Not even.
Exactly.
Not even. Well,
so,
like 1/100th of the world is less than that.
Yeah. I think of it like that because I think of anybody who, like, if you actually make it, like if you make it to one championship or if you make it to the UFC, like this kind of level, the amount of dedication that you have to put into this, the kind of heart you have to have in order to be able to perform at that level, even if you only have like 2, 3, 4 fights and then you just get cut from the organization because you're not at the level to pursue a title. It's like, just to play in the NFL for 2 years is a big deal, right? Like, yeah. And so that's the way I think of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to Bass Rutten the last episode, and he said, I did that, hey, guys talk about who's the best. I said, where do you had a 22-fight winning streak, or he didn't lose over 22 fights. Where do you rank all time? And he said, man, if someone puts me in the top 100, I'm good with it. And he made a really good example. He said 7 billion people in the world. And you're going to say I'm one of the 100 greatest fighters ever? Yeah. And I wanted to say to him, like, your math is not even correct because that's 6 billion right now. Yeah. Not counting all the people who's ever lived before and after and, like even more than 6 or 7 billion. You really think about
but in all fairness, those people never got to compete in the UFC.
But I mean, like over a certain period of time, people die. Yeah. So it was a really good point. Like, yeah, fine. If you want to put me at 100th, cool. Like, and I was like, wow, that's really, really, really good.
But you know what, man? I say the same thing about myself. Like, there are times when I'm on the side of the planet. Like, sometimes I'm actually surprised at how big my fan base is. Right? Like, I told you a story about getting the Hall of Fame award, and actually when I was down in Cebu that week, we hiked for the episode that we were doing was this beautiful hike called Kawasan. There's these waterfalls in Kawasan.
Yeah.
And so we do this like 2-hour hike through all these canyons, and then it ends up like you're jumping off of waterfalls throughout the way, but it ends up culminating into this like 15-meter, so about a 50-foot jump waterfall. And it was just beautiful, beautiful country. But as I'm coming out of that, I run into a fan who's like, "Oh my God, Rich Franklin!" Yeah. And he was like completely taken aback, like, "What are you doing down here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm shooting a show and whatnot." And I'm always like, I'm genuinely like appreciative of that kind of stuff. And I always tell people are like, man, what's that feel like having fans recognize you and all that kind of stuff. And this is what I always tell people so that you stay humble. I'm like, for every person on this planet that cares who I am, there's at least 10 who don't. And then you're like, my math is probably off. Because honestly, for every person who cares who I am, there's probably like 100 or 1,000.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't even know. I haven't done the math on it, but a lot more than 10. But the point that I'm making, obviously, is that I'm way less significant to the majority of the population than I am to this small minority. And I think that's the reason why guys like Boss, he's so humble about things. And he's got the most amazing stories too. I love talking to him.
I know. And he gave me some. He gave me some the other day, and I was just like, how is this even real? Like, how does every interview you have a new story that's wait till you see. You got to listen to this. He's got some story. I mean, I got some crazy stories he puts in mind that I think they're gonna be up there. So let's talk about one championship because tell me what. So you said you're talent scout. You're an executive. Meetings, you do the on-air stuff, you do everything. But what's like a regular daily Tuesday like for you?
Sure. It depends. Like right now, okay, because prior to this, I was running the Warrior Series. This is pre-COVID, right? I mean, once the pandemic set in, it shut down travel. So at that point in time, we were getting ready to go to Japan for recruiting, and then for the first time, the Warrior Series and one championship for that matter was going to do a recruiting endeavor on the other side of the planet. Okay. So I was headed to Brazil and the United States.
Really?
And what we were doing at that point in time was right in the middle of all this. We had our Japan episodes figured out, who we were recruiting. We had like scouting. We were doing the scouting for people in Brazil and looking at the storylines that we might possibly want to pursue for a TV show there, and the same in the U.S. Like we started doing that in endeavor, and then suddenly, immediately, the pandemic kicks in, right?
Yeah.
So then it just changed everything.
Yeah.
And so now for one, like as the dust has settled, in between now and then, it's like, well, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to regroup as a company, like everybody did.
Yeah, of course.
So now what I'm doing is I'm kind of overseeing, or not overseeing, I shouldn't say, but I'm part of taking care of the commentary team. I've been added to the commentary team,
Yep.
and then I help develop the storylines that we're telling on air, like making our storylines.
The backstory of a guy.
Yeah. Just not just the backstory, but the hype of the fight and all that kind of stuff as well. And so that's that. So like a typical Tuesday for me would be. If I'm in those kind of meetings, like we'll sit down and we're going to build backstory lines on people. Like, okay, what's going on here? What has been, said on social about this? What's the bio of this athlete? How does this match up? How does the fight match up? Let's look at some statistical analysis of things and so on and so forth. It goes.
Yeah. So let's talk about the TNT shows like that. You talked about, you guys were going to do a push into America in the Warrior, but you also did a push in America on basically making it easier for American fans to watch the TNT shows. You just had a whole series of shows.
Finally.
Yeah. You had a whole series of shows, and it was definitely directed more towards the American crowd. I mean, you put it on the American time frame. What's your overall assessment of like how did you think the card went? Both from obviously the action, but more from the marketing and the promotion side.
Yeah, I think, look, when you look at things like this, there's so many angles of the way you can look at things. In this present COVID environment, like our company's based in Singapore on this side of the planet, and we're dealing with a lot of different things. So just from a COVID perspective, for example, like we have the Ministry of Health over here oversees how we conduct our shows. And they have a lot of protocols in place to basically, to minimize any kind of if there was an outbreak or anything like that. So we face a lot of challenges with this. Everything down to, for example, the way that they have the stadium set up is cut down into zones, and zones can't cross each other. And it makes doing our job very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And so, in this modern world of doing things like, it's a very challenging environment. I think for our intro, like, look, one championship, like, I guess like the company from a business perspective, it's almost like the way a fighter would be. When I go into, I actually watched one of my fights the other day against when I fought Travis Fulton. And I was watching, and I listened to my post-fight interview afterwards. And I was so young, and I sounded silly. Like, I hate watching old stuff of yourself is so crazy. But I win this match, and it was a good match. Like, I was pretty dominant. And I came out, and I was just like, I didn't like that I did this and I did that. And then you start looking at the things that you don't like. And this is what athletes do. And I think because we are a company who is like centered around the athletes that we do, we don't just have our, we have our e-gamers as well. It's like you have this mentality of like, okay, this is actually, when I look at the one championship on TNT, the one that we did, the series for April, and I look at how everything parlayed for the 4 events, I would say we did a really good job. But as a company, we're like, okay, well, I didn't like the way my footwork was. I didn't like my head movement, and we're doing all that kind of stuff, right? Like, because it's just a natural.
We naturally focus on the negative. I get it. Like, even in this, like there'll be 10, oh, what a great interview. Oh, Rich is so great. And then there'll be like one comment, like, oh, why didn't this idiot know that his next fight was for the title? Why did he? And then I'll focus on that one instead of the 10 other positive. I mean, that's human nature. We
Dude, it's you know what I say this, man? Like, Jesus only had 12 friends, and he had one hater amongst them, right? Like,
that's a good point.
And he was perfect. You can't make everybody
that's a great
happy.
point.
That's just that's the reality of life, man.
Yeah. So one of the storylines, came out that the two biggest name American stars in the organization, Eddie Alvarez and Demetrious Johnson. Now, I think you can make some arguments that there's other American stars that are kind of taking over. Perfect example, Christian Lee. I mean, he's like a star on the rise. But Eddie Alvarez, Demetrious Johnson, they both took losses. What are you guys in a tough situation when these guys lose? Because this is you get just kind of two ways to look at it. The positive spin is they're like, wow, look what all the stuff Eddie Alvarez done. Look at Demetrious Johnson. Demetrious Johnson was, for the longest time, was looked at, and he still is looked at as one of the all-time greatest fighters of all time, one of the all-time greatest pound-for-pound fighters of all time. Look what our guys can do against it. Like, our guys are that good. But then you always get the other ones to say, oh, Eddie's done. Eddie's washed up. That's why he's losing. Like, how do you look at that? And it's such a tough.
I mean, it's on a case-by-case basis, and people are going to see things the way they want to see things. First of all, to address Demetrious Johnson, before he had the title fight against Adriano Moraes, keep in mind, he came to one championship and had several fights. He entered the Grand Prix, and the competition that he faced in the Grand Prix, like, you know, even though he didn't lose, people will just be like, well, you know, he was fighting a nobody. Like, this was a collection of some of the toughest talent that we have in that weight class, right? And he didn't exactly just run through that bracket either. He had some tough fights, and he performed really well. And when you look at DJ's performance, like, clearly he's not lost a step. Like, he's not there. No. It's just he got beat that night. Adriano Moraes had the right game plan for him and ended up beating him. The American audience was also surprised about him getting kneed in the head on the ground. There was a lot of reaction about that. It's like, but the funny thing is that if you actually look at DJ's, like, I think they actually played it on the hype video for him during the fight, like before they walked out.
Yeah, him saying what he enjoyed about it.
Yeah, but there was also a highlight of him kneeing somebody else in the head. On the ground. Yeah. It's like,
they also had his comment. They also had his comment about knees, and I remember people posted that, and I'm like, that's not karma. He didn't complain about getting kneed. If he complained, that'd be different because he said it was positive. Then it was, but no, it's part of the game. He knew it. And, I mean, that's why that's why he's won championship is like, because of knees to the ground. I mean, go back to Pride. People like the soccer kicks and the stomps. What about the people that are going to say Demetrious is just undersized? I mean, he's fighting now at 135 when he was a 125 pounder.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. And so, you know, we have what we developed at One Championship is we developed our hydration protocols. And for the fans that don't understand this, it in effect eliminates weight cutting, you know. So because what our athletes have to do is they have to weigh in and make hydration simultaneously. So you essentially, like, when you will go to the bathroom. They will catch your urine sample. They test your urine to make sure that there's proper hydration. We have a unit for that, or a tool for that. It's called a refractometer, and it measures the specific gravity of urine. You can research that if you want. So they go to the bathroom. We check their urine, check their hydration, and then we check their weight. And in order for them to compete, they have to be not making hydration. It's not an option. But they have to be on weight and on hydration simultaneously. So you can't deplete your body of water and do these 20-pound cuts like I used to do. 20-plus pound cuts like we used to do in the States. And this is designed from an athlete's safety perspective. It's designed to keep the athletes safe. But from in my personal opinion, from an excitement standpoint, like when I'm competing, like when I was competing at middleweight and I'd have to do a 20-plus pound weight cut, it's obviously going to take it out of you, even if you have time to rehydrate. Like, it's going to affect your performance. And so I believe that our athletes, part of the reason why you see really exciting fights in One Championship is because our athletes are hydrated, they're fed, they're drinking water and eating during fight week, and they're ready to go, and they don't have to do this depletion, and so they have more energy levels in the circle. But with that being said, now DJ competing in a class where maybe he was previously cutting to get down is competing in a class where guys are walking at this weight. And I would imagine that he's probably on the smaller side of that weight class, and perhaps that's something that he may need to consider, moving forward in his career.
Yeah, but if anybody could adjust, Demetrious Johnson is probably the guy that could. Yeah, he's been the king of adjustments in mid-fight his whole career. Now, what about Eddie?
So when I look at Eddie, like, just to give my assessment of somebody, like, Eddie does not look like a guy who's lost a step to me yet. Everybody starts questioning this, like, once you hit like that 35 range, then it's like, okay. And it's true. I mean, once you hit 35, the body's going to start slowing down. That's what happens. I'll look at his match against, he got caught against Nashjukin. He had, he was in some trouble against Alvarez, and all these guys have been like basically either champions or number one contenders. At that time, and then he competes against Yuri Lapicus. Now Yuri Lapicus is a great opponent, but I think he was ranked 2 when he and Eddie competed on TNT 1, and Eddie systematically took him down, held him down. Now, granted, I mean, the fight ended well on TV. It ended in a DQ, but we ended up overturning it to a no contest, which I definitely supported the change of. But you can see that Eddie basically had his way with Yuri. Other than the fact that he hit him in the back of the head illegally, like he was able to take him down, control him. And this is like Yuri's a tough opponent. And so, coming out 3 weeks later, there's a part of me that's like, well, I mean, keep in mind, Eddie flew all the way back to the U.S.
Yeah, that's
and then
right.
3 weeks later, flew all the way back to Asia after having competed.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to compete under those kind of conditions. And so when I look at something like when I look at that, I'm like, you're going to argue that this man lost a step? Go through what he went through,
sure, and
then compete against because Okrayun, who he ended up competing, I think after his win over Gafurov, who was our champion at one point as well. Yeah. And that guy's a beast. And Okrayun entered the top, like it was another top 5 competitor. Yeah. I think they gave him a 4 ranking. I can't remember, but nonetheless, like that's when you look at the sequence of events, it's like,
sure.
I'm going to argue against him losing a step at that point in time.
And why would he fly all the way across the whole world twice in a short period of time? Because he's Eddie Alvarez, and the guy loves to fight. And because he loves to fight. It's Eddie Alvarez.
That's what he does.
Which is why he's such a fan favorite, because of all the.
And when I look at Eddie's performance in that match, like because I score the matches from the booth. Yeah. And he got dropped in the first round, and it was bad. I mean, I was sitting there, I was like, I think One Championship posted a video of the commentary booth reaction, and I was just like frozen, like I just looked like a statue, like I didn't even move, and I mean the whole time, and so I couldn't believe he survived that. And that's not what people with weak chins and lack of conditioning. That's right. That's not what old people do, man. He came through that, and by the end of the match, I was like midway through the third round, I'm like, he might actually be able to pull this off because we judge the round in
the entirety.
As a whole, like we judge it as one big thing. Yeah. So it's not like he's down 2 rounds or something like that. We're looking at but then it was just like as he was landing combinations, Oak started landing back. And it was just enough, in my opinion, it was enough to have Oak inch out that decision for sure.
But why would anybody be surprised that Eddie Alvarez gets hurt in a fight and he comes back and he gets rock'em sock? Because that's been his entire career, going all the way back to the Bodog fights and Bellator and UFC and now One Champion. But that's just Eddie Alvarez. I mean, that's him all the way.
And you could hear him talking on the broadcast too, telling the ref like, "I'm okay."
Yeah, like, I'm Eddie Alvarez. Don't stop it. I'm Eddie Alvarez. Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I appreciate that. I've gone way over, and I say that every interview. I apologize, but so you know how it is, and you guys are extremely popular in the Asian market. You're really trying to get a stronghold in the American market. But you know how many people there's MMA fans and there's UFC fans. Like they don't even realize there's other organizations. What do you guys have to do to basically get known to those fans and then turn them from not just UFC fans to One Championship fans?
I mean, I don't think people have to be turned necessarily. I think there's room, there's room for Coke and Pepsi at the top of the mountain, right? Yeah. So, this is what I say. Slowly you will see, and you see the sentiment of one building in the U.S. And I'll give you an example. Like, if you saw the Rodtang match against Danielle Williams on TNT 1. Yep. Man, I mean, everybody, like the U.S. fans are focused on the Demetrious match, but after that was Rodtang's match, and this was a Muay Thai match. Yep. And the U.S. fans aren't really, may not be familiar with that, but this was a Muay Thai match in MMA gloves. And man, I mean, these guys, like, you want to talk about just a great match, and Rodtang, like somebody like that. I think that when people see, because there were people that had no clue, and then when they watched it, like you could see some of the comments, traffic on social that were like, "Wow, man, I tuned in for DJ, but holy crap, this Rodtang match, like, absolutely completely unexpected, and I'm a fan now." Like, and I think that's what it's going to take. I think seeing that the product is slightly different, and that not only do we have athletes that have come that are staples like a Demetrious Johnson or an Eddie Alvarez from the U.S., but we have other athletes like Christian Lee. You mentioned him before.
Angela, his sister.
Yeah, I mean,
Victoria.
Like Christian's legit. I've been on the mat with this kid, man, and when I was a skeptic when we signed him, like One Championship signed him at 17, and I'm like, come on, guys, like he's a kid. Yeah. And this kid, I mean, he's never shied away from a match, taking matches on short notice, beat guys like tough guys, and so I'm just like, it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 fights ago, like, I was like, I'm done underestimating this kid.
Yeah,
And
that's
like,
right. And he's just starching guys in like a minute.
bro, he's surgical, like straight up. Like this guy, this is no joke, but it's like Christian Lee's, his parents, like Ken is his coach. Ken like basically genetically designed his children in a petri dish for this job. And it's not even like Christian is a killer or anything like that. Like they're good. They're like a good Christian family, like nice, the nicest people, give you the shirt off their back. But my God, it's just like me. Like I'm the same guy. But if you're standing across from me in the cage, forget about it, because now it's, I have a job, and this, like his pursuit of just wanting to be the best martial artist. So I think, like, you know, when you look at stuff like that, and then you look at Rodtang, back to the question, you know, I kind of sidebarred. It's like, you see that you got a different product here.
Sure.
And I think that's what's going to end up catching the attention of a lot of the fans in the U.S.
Yeah. And if people like people punching each other in the face, why wouldn't they like it?
Oh,
I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm a UFC fan, I'm an MMA fan. I love fighting. I love watching people compete at the highest level of fighting.
Absolutely.
2 more questions before I let you go. Been a long time since we've seen you in a movie. When are we going to see you in a movie again?
I don't know. You know, actually, man. You know, it was fun, like doing the movie that I did. I've done a few movies, like small parts, but then I had fun. It's fun. But man, you know, I think initially when I first started thinking about doing movies, I didn't realize. And this is, I mean, I just didn't realize, like, the craft of acting.
Sure.
It's not easy stuff. And so when I was out, I decided to go out to LA between the time I retired in my head and actually announced my retirement, you know, that period of time.
Yeah.
Like, I was in LA at that point in time, part of the time, and I was taking like acting lessons and thought, like, yeah, maybe this is something I want to pursue. And it's just like, I was like, man, it's a tough job. Like, it's a tough job. To give you an example, like, if you have to play a scene where you're sad, and to prep for that, like, you're gonna kind of like put yourself into this mental state. And it's where I learned at least some basic level what happens to guys like a Heath Ledger, who is in the role of Joker for months on end.
Yeah. They consume it.
Yeah, man. And so I'm just like, I didn't even like sitting around for a full day in a saddened state. I'm like, I don't want to live like this. So, you know, it's just it's a complex thing. So, you know, if I could be in comedies the rest of my life, maybe that worked for me. But unfortunately, when your background is punching people in the face for a living, they don't see you as the guy that's telling jokes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who's had the nickname Ace who was ever successful in comedy.
Yeah.
Last question, more of a serious question. So you've been on the other side of the world. Obviously, it's a completely different culture than America. What's one thing you've learned from that culture that has made you a better person? Not MMA related, just a better person overall.
Well, I'll tell you what. Like, and this is what's kind of motivated me to like do my podcast now. And I think life has come back full circle for me. I started off as a teacher, and everybody who's a fan of me knows my story, like being a high school math teacher and stuff like that. And I always said to people that there was a day where I woke up and I realized I love teaching, but I didn't love teaching math. And the statement makes sense if you think about it. And so I get into fighting as a career. And then, but really the whole time I was fighting, like when you think about it, I was there. I was the UFC's guy to teach the masses of MMA, the safety of MMA, all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so as you fast forward, I'm on this side of the planet. I'm traveling around. I traveled to places like one place that comes to mind is I was in this village just outside of Chiang Mai, Thailand, called Amkhoi. And this is, and I mean, these places, they're a dime a dozen on this side of the planet. These people live in a village where they have to walk 4 hours round trip just to get fresh water.
Yeah.
Every time they run out of water, they got to go get fresh water. They anytime they need to resupply on goods, they got to walk to the local market. They end up making a lot of their own food and clothing. Like the day we were there shooting our show, we had to hunt for like eels, like water eels in the rice paddies. We had to catch them, and it was like whatever we caught, we had for dinner. And if we didn't catch anything, then we didn't have dinner.
That's crazy.
And people live like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I thought, like, man, I would love to share not that information, but like if I have guests on that can share, like if they have a perspective on this world that can help view, shape, change, or just make people better, that's what I would want to do. And so when I see things from other people's perspective, when I see, like we talked about poverty, like those people, they'd be the classic definition of poverty, but they're some of the happiest people I've ever met on the planet. They don't care about getting the latest Birkin bag. They don't care about driving the Bentley. They don't, like, all they care about is like getting their work done in the day and coming home and spending time with their family, man. And at the end of the day, like, you end up realizing you can travel the world. You can experience all these cultures. I've been to about 60 countries in my life now. Wow. And some of the cultures that I've experienced, it's great. Like, but at the end of the day, man, everybody needs like food, shelter, and love. Like that's what we're pursuing, connection in this world. And I don't care if you're in the middle of downtown Mumbai, or if you're in Sri Lanka, or if you're in Scandinavia, or you're hiking the Himalayas, or you're in the United States in Detroit. And at the end of the day, like, even the hustlers on the streets, they want to come home and they want to be connected to family, and that's what people want, man. And so, like, it's like I want to be able to show that to people. And that's what I try to do, like, with the guests on my podcast and stuff like that. And that's what I tried to do when we were filming One Warrior Series. And that's, and that even to some level when I was competing, people, my fans, they had like a connection with me, right? And I wrote about this in my retirement letter. I said, for me, every time I won, it was like everybody shared a piece of that victory with me. Sure. It was like my coaches were like, yeah, we trained him. My training partners, my family was like, yeah, we helped Rich win because we were willing to move Thanksgiving dinner a week back after his fight, because he was cutting weight. Like, everybody had their tiny little sacrifice, all the way down to the fans. But, the same thing happens when you lose, man. Everybody shares a piece of that loss, right? Like, I mean, when's the last time the Patriots lost where you didn't go home and, I don't know, got in a fight with your wife or something?
Yeah. Oh, I know.
You're having a miserable day.
Oh, I remember when they lost the perfect season. I remember sitting out in the car, like, banging my hands. And, oh, my God, I can't believe we're this close.
And that's the thing, man, is because you have that connection. And so as silly as it sounds, it's like people crave this connection in life. And so it's like, man, if you got your basic necessities, like food and shelter and clothing, I guess we can add in there. It's like connection, love. That's that fourth one, man. And my life comes back around full circle with teaching. And that's why I started my podcast, and why, I want to be able to share some of my stories with this kind of stuff, and enlightenment, and the knowledge and wisdom that my guests have with people. Maybe it'll impact them in some positive way.
Yeah, I think it does. You're speaking truth. One wise man once said he named all the great virtues in the world, but he said the greatest of all is love.
Dude, that's what Christ said in the Bible, man. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, might, and soul. And the second to that is love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, if we truly could follow that second rule, if we really loved people the way we loved ourselves, man, there would be no more greed. There would be no more hunger for power in this world. And that's how you're supposed to live, man. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Paul the Apostle said something similar when he named all the great virtues, and then he said the greatest of all is love.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me tell you, the worst virtue is sincerity, and because it can be misconstrued.
Yeah. Guys, there you have it. He is a UFC Hall of Famer. He's also a Hall of Famer in life. He is the Vice President of One Championship, Rich Franklin. Rich, thank you so much for your time. I took way too much long. It was absolutely great talking to you, man.
Man, you can't get out of a conversation with like a short one with me, man, but appreciate being on. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man. All right, guys, we're on to the second segment. I'm talking to a girl that is all the way on the other side of the world. She returns to action May 21st at Bellator 250 when she takes on Leah McCourt. She is Janay Harding. Janay, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I appreciate you taking the time early morning. I hope I didn't wake you up too early. So let's go into it. So we talked after your last fight. I asked you, do you feel like now you're just entering your prime against Jessy Miele? And you said absolutely, and that's why I thought you had your best performance. Just go over that again. Like, what stood out to you when you look back at your fight? What stands out to you where you really feel like you're coming into your own?
I feel like the main thing was just confidence, being confident in my abilities, being confident in being able to throw my shots, like things that I've always had strength in, like striking and stuff, but being confident enough to back it up and know that, and initiate takedowns and stuff with a jiu-jitsu black belt and stuff like that. It's just the confidence in backing myself, knowing that this is exactly where I need to be, I'm finally kind of having everything kind of come together. I've got a solid base. I've finally got a solid team. Everything's all finally coming together and evolving me into the all-round athlete that I always knew I was going to be, but it never had quite clicked. And I think now all I needed was just that added of mindset. And now it's all really coming together. I'm in the best place. I'm in the best environment. And for that reason, it really shows in my performances, which is exciting.
Yeah, there's something in the waters out there in Australia. It seems like you're taking over our sport. I'm glad that you talked about confidence. You said after that fight that you said that now you're feeling like you really belong here. Is that something you struggled with before? Just like having confidence that you belong at the highest level?
It wasn't that I didn't feel like I didn't belong. It was just more that I just felt like I had a lot to learn, and I felt like I was behind on just a few things. I mean, like my very first opponent in Bellator was someone who had fought on Invicta multiple times against like Megan Anderson and stuff like that. And it wasn't about that. It was just like my fight before my Bellator debut was in Hong Kong in front of like 1,000 people. Yeah. Like it's just a different, it's a different thing. It's a different journey, a different pathway. And I just wasn't quite used to how things were done, I guess. And just these big promotions. It wasn't that I didn't deserve to be fighting these caliber of girls, because I knew I 100% did. It was just getting used to all the rest of it. And being prepared for like international travel. Was my first fight in the US.
Absolutely.
More the way in Australia, like you're saying. So it's getting used to, flying 18 hours and then like staying over there and getting used to like the supermarkets and just basic stuff. I mean, that's all sort of changed now. And it's crazy to think that I'm fighting someone who hasn't fought in the US. I don't think it's crazy to think that I'm fighting someone who hasn't had as much experience with me with travel, which never really happens. I mean, Jessy Miele lives like an hour away from being in time. Yeah. And I mean, she's like one of my friends now. And I was just like, man, like I'm out here flying like 24 hours and you literally had to drive.
You drive it 24 minutes. Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's just like these little things.
Yeah. You drive 24 hours. She drove 24 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you do the sleep? Like, do you try to get on like the American time frame? Are you staying up all night, staying on the Australian sleep? Like, how do you manage that?
No, I just mainly for like my schedule's sake and for all the training sessions' sake, I stay on Australian timeline. And then I just, the one positive is that like, I guess like it's even when I had my Bellator debut, I knew like I was well traveled. I knew I understood traveling in a sense and flying and everything like that. I mean, I'd lived in the UK, I'd lived in Thailand, I'd lived in Australia, New Zealand. So like, it's not like I hadn't like seen the world in a sense, but it was just more like I didn't know how to adapt that into fight week. And now I kind of have not really like foolproof. I mean, I'm always trying to improve things, but in a general sense from the get-go, I knew, always fall asleep on the American timeline as soon as I land. Always like, literally I structure my flight to know that even if they're making us eat at certain times, which usually it is correct, usually it is, you eat towards the your port of locations timeline. Yep. So like you eat lunch at what time everyone should be eating lunch and that kind of thing. You should be going to sleep at what time they're going, like all that sort of like the lights dim and stuff, lower the pressure, all these things. Like I understand that, but at the same time, I almost make sure that if I think for this next flight, like I already know we land at 7 a.m. right? So I'm probably gonna try sleep. I'm probably going to stay awake for most of the journey. It'll be 2 different flights. So I'll try to stay awake for most of the journey, then sleep a little bit, then stay awake, then sleep for that second flight, and then hopefully wake up just before that, that time that we're starting to get ready to land, so that I'm right on that timeline, and then stay up that whole day to make sure, I'm ready to go to sleep on that timeline. If you say fall asleep earlier, and then I'm awake at like say 1 a.m. till 7 a.m. and then I land in the US at 7 a.m. I've already been up for 6 hours. It's going to be real hard for me to stay awake all day. And if I have a nap, or I've seen other people, I've seen coaches, I've seen like my coaches have a nap. I'm like, nah, you've screwed it up. Like, I'm sorry, but you've screwed it up. Like, you can't have a nap. You can't give in to like going to sleep. Like, you just have to be smart about how you're doing it. smart about the water loading, smart about what you're eating on the plane, being prepared. I think being prepared is definitely number one thing, especially with traveling. But it's just like another one of these aspects that I'm happy to live in Australia and I love Australia. So, I mean, my choice is to stay here rather than move over to the US. And for that reason, I have to take the losses and the negatives of that, which is traveling. And so therefore I have to get this traveling thing down packed. And I think I finally have. I definitely have all the understanding of it pretty well. And therefore it doesn't affect my sleep, my jet lag, and it doesn't affect my performance. And that's, at the end of the day, the most important thing.
Yeah, it's funny because it's something, as you know, being in America, we don't even think about that when it comes to international fighters, the difference in time and sleep. And I mean, I know we have different foods for, generally, and different things.
Yeah.
And then not only when you get here to America, suddenly you got to do medicals, you got to do media, you got to do weigh-ins. Like, it's not just, okay, get on a sleep schedule. One thing I know you say is that you kind of like learning on the job, and you say because your lack of experience, you kind of like got to the big leagues pretty quickly. When you talk about experience, are you talking about the experience like the things you just explained, or would you have rather had more fights on the regional scene before you jump to the big leagues?
I think just more fights. Like, cage time is invaluable. And that's why I always seeked out other opportunities in, say, boxing and Muay Thai and stuff. And so I had a few Muay Thai fights, I had a few boxing fights, tried to do as many jiu-jitsu competitions as I could, submission wrestling comps. I always knew that these things were going to be really important. But unfortunately, just in Australia, the population and popularity of the sport wasn't enough to quite get opponents, say, every 6 months. I mean, there was like a time between my pro debut and my second professional fight that it was like 12 months in between the two, just because nobody would fight me and there was nobody to fight. It wasn't even that people were denying me or anything. There was just nobody to fight anyway. So it was sort of like we had a lot of girls maybe coming through the amateur ranks, and then the pros were already signed to international fights. And therefore I ended up fighting someone like Jess for my second fight, who had already fought in Invicta a few times, already fought in Japan, and then I had only had one pro fight in Sydney. And it was sort of like, okay, and then after that I ended up fighting Arlene, who was in between contracts. So again, it's like these are the only people that were really available to me, because there wasn't other pros like me that had one or two pro fights, and then I could match up against them and everything would go smoothly. So it was just sort of like this big up and down. I guess like that's something that I envy, I guess, about the US, is that the population and popularity is a little bit bigger. So therefore you have a lot more opportunities for opponents. And so therefore you're able to experience just different more. I mean, I only had like 3 amateur fights, and that's not a massive amateur record. Someone like Leah, especially, who's been able to be in the IMAF, we only had an Australian amateur team as of last year, and then before that we had a New Zealand team which I could have represented, but unfortunately I'd had a pro boxing fight, and then they didn't let me be an amateur on paper, and even though I was still an amateur MMA. So it's just all these things just never ended up working out for me, which is fine, because ultimately at the end of the day I'm paving the way for all the Australian, New Zealand females that are coming after me, and hopefully increasing their popularity and showing them that they can still make it to the big stage. And I'm still going to make it no matter what, all these ups and downs. But yeah, it would have been great to sort of deal with those long, hard fought 3-rounders, deal with like maybe getting knocked down. I don't know, just deal with like different adversities, just understanding the problem solving, and being like, yeah, I've been there, I've been in deep waters, I know what to expect now. And now that I'm ready up against these like high level girls, now I can take that experience in, whereas I was taking learning going into against these high level girls. So it's sort of like it always works out. I mean, I still ended up winning a few against these girls, so it's not like I don't deserve to be here skill wise, but I just would have liked to have a better understanding of the entire sport before I kind of got to this level, so that I could have shown a little bit more and been a little bit more confident in my performances. But I guess now that's all working out now, and everything happens for a reason in my eyes. So therefore I'm exactly where I need to be, and it's all coming together exactly when it should. Absolutely.
And you're really looking great right now. You said in your last fight that you wanted to return around January, February. Obviously that's not happening. You come back May. Did something happen, or you just didn't get the call?
I just didn't get the call mainly, but also because, Bellator didn't really start up until like a month ago. And then on top of that, we were matched up a little bit sooner. But I just think there was some visa issues maybe on her end, or some traveling issues. And that's just how it is at the moment. I guess it's just like, I would love to fight every 3 months if I could, but, you know, in a world that we're in now, especially being an international fighter, I'm not able to, you know, just go over there at any time. Like, I'm not on the East Coast, I'm not anywhere. So therefore it's to be expected that I can't have everything that I want. And I'm just grateful that I'm fighting, and grateful that, it's going to be coming around, and therefore it's not as soon as I would have liked, but we're still getting there at the end, and we're getting the job done.
So let's talk about your matchup. You're going against Leah McCourt. I mean, is this a matchup you like? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, definitely. I've been obviously looking forward to this matchup for a very long time. We were matched up last year, it didn't go through, then she got her surgery, and I got matched up with somebody else. So it's definitely something that I've been excited for a very long time. I think it was maybe like even before that. I think maybe even like 2 years ago it was that she called me out after one of her wins. So therefore this has been something that's on the horizon for a very long time. So it's definitely someone that I've been looking at as a whole, her entire game. It's someone that as much as maybe on paper her record doesn't show as much experience, she's definitely got a lot of experience within being a judo black belt, jiu-jitsu brown belt, and an amateur world champion. So these are all great things that motivate me into knowing that this is going to be a fantastic fight, a fantastic scrap against kind of grapplers versus striker, but at the same time we're definitely more than that in our own rights. So therefore it just be a good all-rounder. It's a good matchup, I think, for the fans as well. So therefore it'll be something that a lot of people will keep their eyes on. UK versus Australia as well brings a lot of international eyes on it, and we're doing it in the US. So these are all really cool aspects of the game that I think will bring a good match. Yeah,
nothing like Australian versus a Brit in America. It's like when they put Daly and Page against each other in Connecticut. But you know what? In the COVID world, you can't be too picky.
Get what you get.
So you're ranked number 6 in the the Bellator rankings. That division, I mean, it's wide open. I mean, are you looking at this as like you get an impressive win, you could get a title shot next? Are you looking at it like that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at it to expect everything, I'm looking at it to, if I get this win and I stay at 6, great. If I get this win and I move up to 5, also great. If I get this win and they want me to get one more win and fight for the title, then also great. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just kind of ready for anything, because it's just one of those divisions that's chopping and changing. The main event of 259 is obviously a fantastic one that I'll keep my eyes on. So therefore it's just playing it as it comes, taking this fight first and foremost. Obviously the most important priority is this fight, but therefore understanding that this could mix it up quite a lot and solidify my name, not just at number 6, but just in the top 10.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. We got to wrap up soon because I know you got other interviews to do, but I got to ask you this. You just mentioned the main event. The main event is Cris Cyborg, the champion in your division, going against Leslie Smith. I know other people got to ask your prediction. Who cares? We all know who you're predicting anyways. But hypothetically, in a weird COVID world, things happen. And, I mean, things happen all the time, but especially in the COVID world. One of these fighters come down with COVID. Not obviously, neither one of us are wishing that on anybody, but something happens. Yeah. You're the next highest ranked person on the card. Any chance that you would jump at the opportunity, go in the main event and fight, either fight with Cris or Leslie?
I've actually never thought of this. I'd 100% fight Leslie. Like we're saying with the experience and stuff, I want to learn from my mistakes, and I want to do these last moves correctly.
Sure.
I would obviously, if I'm gonna fight someone like Cris Cyborg, I would like a proper camp. Leslie, not that I underrate her or anything, but she's a little bit more similar to Leah in a sense. So therefore my preparation would have probably been the same. I think I maybe would have adapted a few different things if I was fighting Cris. So therefore, the camp would have been a little bit different.
Of course.
But all in all, I mean, yes, I would definitely say, God forbid, and all well wishes to both girls. But if Cris maybe came down, I mean, I would definitely fight Leslie for sure. I would probably say no to a title because I'm only making good decisions now. I've had all my mock-ups as per se, and I mean, if they said to scrap your fight with Leah and then maybe 6 weeks time fight Chris.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Like I would probably do that.
Like if a major injury happened. If a major injury.
Real quick. Yeah, and then spend 6 weeks 100% honed in on Chris. That's all I would like. Because I'm only making good decisions. But yeah, these are all interesting things. And COVID world, like you're saying, that's actually the first time I've even thought about that.
Well, because I'm the best. I'm the best at this. I'm not,
you're outside the bar.
I think I'm like ranked number 6 in the rankings. No. Last question. I'm gonna hold you this one. So don't do your famous sidestep. Last question. So you're fighting at Mohegan Sun. Right there is a big famous sports booking site. Someone wants to make some money. How do you win? What round? What's like? I want to walk out. I want to walk out with a mint coat. I want to walk out with a new caddy. Maybe two pretty ladies around me. Like, what am I betting on?
It's most likely that I'm an underdog too. Well, I don't know. I always usually am. This is maybe the first time I might not be, but probably on. So you could make good money, I think, off a second round TKO.
There you go. And you'll get all that stuff. And if she finishes in the third round, she will give you
back.
She'll give you your money back.
Too. Yeah.
Janay, thank you so much for your time. I wish you good luck in this fight and all future fights.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys, we are back. We're on the third segment of today's show. This is where I talk to the prospects. Before I get to this process, I want to thank, in the first segment, former UFC Middleweight Champion Rich Franklin. And then we had Janay Harding, who fights on this Friday's Bellator. But also fighting this Friday is a guy that he's fighting in the main event of LFA 108 when he takes on Gregory Rodrigues. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Fremd. Josh, how you doing, man?
What's up, man? I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing excellent. So tell me what goes on in your head. You're in fight week. You got kind of down to the last preparations. Like, what's going on in your head?
Oh man, for me, a ton of stuff. Like I'm envisioning the entire week. You know, I'm trying to plan out my week from when I get to the airport, when I fly there. I know all the process that I'm going to have to go through with COVID testing, getting my weight down, making weight, just the whole process. I like to just visualize the entire thing.
So you've been on an absolute roll. You got a bunch of first round finishes, but say someone's never seen you fight. Some listener hasn't seen you. Describe yourself to them. Sell yourself. Sell yourself a little.
Well, you know, I don't like to go out there and say that I'm the best at anything. Like I'm going to dazzle you in anything. But I think the one thing that I would sell myself on is, man, I go out there every time ready to scrap, you know, give it everything I got. You know, from bell to bell, I just want to go out there. And I like to believe that my gas tank is better than most. So I just go balls to the wall the whole time.
Any frustrating, like, you know, you're talking about your gas tank. I know you're in Colorado, so you're in elevation. You're working it. You got this deep gas tank, but you keep putting guys out early, quick. Did anything like frustrated? Like, man, I ran all those miles, or I did all those, and man, I finished this guy in a minute. Like,
no, you know, that can cross your mind a little bit, but for the most part, it's more of a, thankful I didn't have to dip into that reserve that time. I can move on to the next one without any injuries. I didn't have to take a lot of time off, you know, in between fights. So, yeah, I mean, it's more of a blessing than anything, just knowing I have that in my back pocket if I need it.
Now, you're in the main event, so, you know, all eyes are on you. You're going against a guy, Gregory Rodrigues. He's got a nice record. He's been on a run. You know, he's Brazilian. He's got a good career himself. Tell me, what's your thoughts of the matchup?
You know, I really like the matchup. I think it's a great test for myself. I honestly think that this matchup between Gregory and I could have been on UFC Fight Night. It could have been on a Contender Series fight. LFA is getting it for pretty much a steal. And I think he's a great opponent. He's very strong, very good on the ground. You know, I could just list all of his accolades on the ground and everything. But I think I have a lot of ways that I can win this fight, and I'm very excited to go out there and show people that, you know, I'm just gonna go out there and fight how I always fight. I'm gonna try and give a great performance, and as soon as that bell dings, it's go time.
Now, usually there's like two camps when it comes to preparation. There's one camp that's like, hey, I want to study this guy. I want to know everything about him. You know, this is my job, so I need to be prepared. Then you have the other like thought, whereas no, I don't like to get psyched out. I don't want too much about him. Let my coaches do that. Where do you fall?
You know, I I'd say I'd fall right in the happy medium of both, because I do like to watch some tape. I do like to know who I'm fighting. But also, when it comes to preparation, I also have a plan in my head. My coaches have a plan in their head, and we discuss it throughout camp. But at the end of the day, it's a fight, you know? I want to go out there and show that the skills that I've been working on are better than the skills that he's been working on.
Absolutely. Now, you're still with Factor X, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so now this guy from, you're from Pennsylvania, you ended up in Colorado, you're training one of the best teams in the world. You're there. What advice do you get? I mean, you got UFC veterans, you got UFC stars, you got Bellator. I mean, the room is absolutely loaded with talent. I mean, it's one of the best teams in the world. What advice do these top guys tell you, while you're getting this close? Like, what they, you're right there knocking on the door. What do they tell you?
They tell me to just enjoy it. I've had one of the guys that I've looked up to for a long time since I moved out here, Brandon Royval, who, when I first got out here, he had his fight for the LFA title, had a couple bumps, changing opponents, but he went out there, performed, got a short notice fight, and he was able to live out a dream, and he just told me, just do what I do. Like, he believes in me, I think, more than I believe in myself sometimes. Sure. So he's given me some great advice, Also, I train like Dustin Jacoby, who's a vet of the sport of kickboxing, MMA, all of it. He's been a great mentor to me. Just enjoy the ride, enjoy this process, because, on the outside looking in, it's so frustrating sometimes. But I know once I get a seat at the table, once I belong, like, it's going to be a hell of a ride.
How much do you think of an advantage is it, and not necessarily this matchup, but, overall in your career, to have these guys that have been in the same, I mean, you just mentioned Brandon Royval, he fought for the LFA title. He went the same route that you went. Like, how much of an advantage is that he, like, not only has he fought in big fights, but he knows exactly what you're going through, because, he was on TV, he was in the main events, like, what advantage do you think, especially in the regional scene? Because not every regional fighter, there's a lot more in the higher level you get up, a lot more, super teams with, your team and some of the other ones. But on the regional scene, you get a lot of smaller, guy training with a smaller team, doesn't really get that experience. Like, how much of an advantage has that been for you?
Well, I wouldn't say it's like an advantage right now, because I know I'm very familiar with the camp that Gregory comes from, and it was actually a camp that I was going to move to before I came to Denver, but some things worked out the way they did, and I was here in Denver. And I know that he also has a very similar teammate, Brendan Allen, who held the LFA title. So, I'm sure he's getting advice from him. I'm getting advice from Brandon. And the advice is great and all, but it's all how you take it. And at the end of the day, when you step in the cage and the bell rings, like, all that flies out the window, So it's good for the preparation leading up, but when it comes to an advantage, I don't think there's one.
I've seen you already talk about that you feel like this win gets you in the UFC or gets you into a long-term contract with Bellator or whatever the route is. You think it's going to propel you to bigger things. Do you feel it anymore, like, heading into this? Do you feel more pressure? Do you feel more excitement? Is is the emotions enhanced at all? Like, what's going on?
No, I try and keep a level head. There are times where my mind will race off with, oh, what if this, and I thought with my performance in my last fight, that might have done it. That might have gotten me it. But this game's very funny, like, I don't try and put too much pressure on myself with added, like, oh, this belt means this. At the end of the day, I'm getting ready for a fight. And if you're not pumped up or nervous or ready for a fight, just like my wrestling coach used to tell me, like, you're going out there to wrestle someone, like, to get into a fight. If that doesn't pump you up, the trophy's not going to pump you up, a medal's not going to pump you up. Like, the act in itself should be the motivation for your training. And that's how I approach this. Like, there's going to be a really big, muscular, talented dude trying to take my head off. I'm going to prepare to my wit's end to be at the best possible Josh Fremd I can be, and then go out and perform.
Yeah, I think that coach gave you really solid advice when you think about it. What was the coach's name? Give him some love.
His name was Kyle Martin. We gave him his nickname in high school was Guido. He was my junior high wrestling coach, my high school wrestling coach, all the way. Pretty much, I started wrestling about 7th grade, and he was my coach all the way through high school. been an amazing guy, amazing mentor and everything. He's taught, like, that lesson right there. I've never really told him that, how much it meant to me, but just verbalizing it now, I'm going to have to go let him know.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So shout out to Kyle Guido Martin. Is that what you said?
Martin, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Kyle Guido Martin. I saw an interview that was interesting, and I understand where you're coming from. You said, you don't feel like this gets you into a Contender Series, this gets you into the UFC. So I wanted to ask you, I know you don't want to go that route, but obviously if the UFC calls, especially, we're getting close to the summer when they start filling the Contender Series spots, you're willing to take that, right?
I mean, if it comes down to it, yeah, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm better than that,
Sure.
No. If, a short notice fight doesn't come up, hypothetically, I win this fight, leading forward, I don't get this opportunity yet, then yeah, if that's my route, dude, I'm willing to do anything I have to do to get in. I know, like, I never thought it was going to be an easy route for me. Like, I've seen people get picked up after 3 fights, 5 fights, whatever. I knew that, just where I come from, that it's going to be a hard grind. So I'm willing to do whatever is necessary.
Absolutely. So that would probably go with this. So if, excuse me, a lot of times guys, when they make their debuts, they go the Contender Series route, but also a lot of times it's the short notice route. It's the, hey, something fell through, especially now with the COVID times, and we need a middleweight in a week. We talked off air. You said you're a big fan. You watch the fights. You're into it. You ever, peek over at the Sherdog page, check out who's on it, say, oh man, there's a middleweight. What if something happens? Like, I need to be ready.
Yeah, I've been that way for the past 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Like, my sole focus has been on Gregory Rodrigues.
As it should be.
Yeah, but I have thoughts like, oh, well, if this guy falls out, I think that's a really good matchup for me. If this guy falls out, I peek over. And a couple of the guys who were fighting this past couple weekends were people at LFA that I should have fought. I was scheduled to fight. I had injuries. They pulled out, like different things like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I look. Everyone looks.
Yeah, I mean, I know they say, the saying is, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You'd be ready and having your manager, hey, someone dropped out. Hey, I got a guy. I got the LFA, LFA champion, if after this weekend, Let me ask you this. So, obviously you're in camp, you're training, you're improving. And it's so tough with you because you're ending guys in 1 minute. So if I was breaking down film, like I do a lot of the film studying for the previews and stuff, and I would have a very hard time breaking you down because when you beat a guy in a minute and a half, you can't really see that much, and I get a lot more notes in a 15-minute fight. So what improvements have you been making over these runs, even though we haven't got to see it?
Oh, I like to think I've been making improvements everywhere. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, wrestling, my striking, transition, my blending, my conditioning, my strength, I feel like I've just been evolving everywhere. And, I haven't got to show that yet, but I believe that Gregory's going to be the one to pull it out of me. He's going to make me dig deep. This is going to be a fight where I'm going to have to show everyone, like, I'm talented in all facets of this game, so I'm very high level, and I want to go out and I want to show that to people.
All right, my very last question, and I apologize, we run out of time. I feel like we just started to get into it, but you just said, you're better than ever. You feel like everything's kind of clicking. You improved everything. Give me your prediction. Like you said, Greg's going to pull out the best out of you. So how's the fight how's it going to go down?
I envision it in so many ways. I believe that in any of the rounds, I could knock him out. I carry my power long beyond the first round. So if I don't get him in the first, I'm going to get him in the second. I don't get him in the second, it will definitely be in the third because I believe that I'm just going to take his gas away from him. I'm going to wear him out. And if I don't get it early, I'm going to get it in the third.
There you have it. Greg, I want to wish you good luck in this fight, all future fights, and let's do it again soon.
For sure, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys. That's this week's episode of MMA Past, Present, and Future. I want to thank all three of our guests. First was former UFC Middleweight Champion, current One Championship Vice President Rich Franklin, Bellator standout Janay Harding, and who I just talked to. He's fighting this Friday on LFA, Josh Fremd. So this is what you got to do. I want you to support all three of these fighters. So first, Rich Franklin was talking on his podcast called Quite Franklin. Go over there and check it out. It's a really awesome. It's not an MMA related one. He talks about life issues with experts in fields. Check it out. It's a really cool way to support him. Of course, obviously, watch all the One Championship shows. But you're going to have to balance a little bit because Bellator and LFA is going to be at the same time. However, it worked out perfect. Janay's fighting early on the prelims. So go over to Bellator, check that out. And as soon as her fight is over, head over to UFC Fight Pass and see Josh. It'll both work out. So anyways, guys, that was this week's episode of MMA Past, Present, Future. See you next time.